There we go. Here we are alive, back on the world of the living, or whatever we want to call it.
Yes, it's the episode 8, season 4.
Ooh.
Episode 7 was just a podcast. I'm sorry. In your absence, Bob, I did a podcast and I had to do it all by my lonesome. I don't know if it worked out or not.
Well, I don't know. It's kind of like talking to yourself. Sometimes you just need expert advice.
There you go.
Yeah.
There you go. So you had a good time bobbing around 2 different oceans?
I did. Yeah. Yeah. It was quite fun. Going through the canal was an experience. Interesting. Thoroughly enjoyed it. In spite of getting caught in a torrential downpour while standing on the bow of the ship.
Wow. And did you notice that there were a lot of Chinese at either end of the canal, allowing you to go in and go out?
I noticed a lot of boats. Whether they were
What do you mean,
Asian
boats?
or
Mean ships?
ships. Well, there were a few boats there too. And apparently, according to the captain, there was what did he say, a 10-foot crocodile that was in the lock alongside of us as we went through. So,
whoa. It's always amazing, though, to watch how precisely those locks are in comparison to the ships that pass through it. There's really literally inches on either side of the ship.
yeah.
Because I guess when they built that over 100 years ago, it was big, and the boats or the ships were much smaller. But when you look at these enormous freighters and even the big cruise ships, or even the aircraft carriers that can go through there now, there's literally only inches or millimeters or centimeters between the sides of the ship. And there's a lot of ships get rashes going through the canal.
Well, that's true. And in spite of the fact that they built the new tunnel or the new thing not too long ago, they made up rules as they went along and said that, well, no ship will ever reach. It's kind of like a double dog dare in our language.
Right.
Anyway, yeah. And I also saw in the news today that, or yesterday, I think it was, that Panama is maybe considering building a natural gas pipeline so that all the ships wouldn't have to transport themselves through the locks. They would just be able to offload their product in one and have it shipped down a pipeline and get on another one. So,
why would they do that? What's the logic of that?
Cost, I guess. Maybe it's cost a lot to build a pipeline, but in the overall scheme of things, it might turn out to be cheaper if you just pull up to a dock and offload your product and have another ship on the other side of the canal load it back up when they take off. It's probably a bit more secure as well because you just got the pipeline. You don't have to worry about a ship that's caught in the lock having an accident and putting the whole thing out of commission. I don't know. Interesting stuff.
Well, yeah, I never would have thought. I mean, the pipeline, unload a ship to reload, because you'd have to store it. You couldn't just pump it from one side of the isthmus to the other.
Actually,
you'd have to.
We have that happens here on the infamous $36 billion pipeline that was only supposed to cost us 12 or something, that they can run a product from wherever the refinery is in Alberta to the refinery here in Burnaby. And within a half hour, they can clean that out and ship a different product.
Is that right?
Yeah, it's amazing what technology is going to do. But
I didn't know that. That is very amazing.
And I guess too, if one ship is in the Caribbean side and the other is on the Pacific side, and there's a 20-minute delay or whatever it happens to be between offloading and onloading that it takes to get across, what is it, 75 miles or something? I don't know what it is. I forget right offhand. But.
Well, it's around there, or 75 kilometers. I think it's my memory serves me correctly. It's 52 miles, which is about
72 kilometers. Yeah.
Yeah, But
77, whatever it is. But
yeah,
I have
yeah.
no idea. You know, it's not going to travel at the speed of light, that's for sure. But, you know, getting from one side to the other might only be 15, 20 minutes. So if the ships are in place on both sides, it could probably be a pretty quick transport.
Hmm.
And that's a lot quicker than having a ship go through. And, you know, it takes a good couple hours for the locks to fill and drain and move along. And so, yeah, it's people are thinking.
Well, you know, it's clearly a moneymaker for
Yeah.
Panama, and I don't know how this new arrangement with the U.S. and the Panamanians through Surprise Supplies BlackRock is now the the company replacing the Chinese interests at the entrance and the exit of the, depending on which direction you're going, of the canal. But anyway, that's a story for another day. What BlackRock
Yes,
seems
it
to
is.
be doing. But
It,
the interesting developments while you're away are starting to accumulate in various actions. The local story for us here in North America is the tariff war
Mhm.
is well and truly underway in its various fashions. And so the latest spin-off of that is the business of having Canadians register to remain in the U.S. more than 30 days. And it's got nothing to do with tariffs,
Well,
particularly,
no,
but
this is all part and
it's
parcel of that.
coincidental, you might say.
It's part and parcel of the whole porous border aspects, I guess, that has President Trump perhaps annoyed with Canada. You know, as we've talked about offline several times, you know, we say one thing and we end up doing another. Part and parcel of which is, yeah, we're going to put more resources on the 49th parallel with the RCMP and Black Hawk helicopters and more patrols and blah, 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 blah. And then in the next breath, they're bringing in 5,000 more people from, shall I say, circumspect countries that sometimes you don't know who these people are, or we can't prove who they say they are. I don't know. It's mixed messages, but that's always the way it's been here.
Well, you know, you and I had many years of experience with the whole issue of border crossing rules and regulations.
Yes.
Southbound, northbound didn't matter. But, you know, the CBC article that brought to my attention was that this exemption, for example, for Canadians not to get fingerprinted by CBP, which otherwise would be imposed on all other foreign nationals starting on April 11th. So the special relationship between Canada and the U.S. This is the only country that they've exempted from having fingerprinting done. I think you were telling me that the worst thing you ever want to do is arrive at an airport in the U.S. When an overseas flight shows up and you're waiting there to be processed because of all the stuff now that has to be done. And
Yeah.
fingerprinting is part of it, eh? And the article also suggests that foreign nationals, and we'll talk about who's a foreign national in American eyes, who have I-94s or I-94Ws are exempted from fingerprinting. And you remember the I-94 business back in the day when we were, you know, stamping and stapling and whatever. You know, we'd have I remember at the end of the day, we'd have a big box of I-94s that were pulled out of passports that were piling up in the admin office. And once a month, someone would come down from INS back in those days, actually pick. That's how important the I-94 was to them, because they could care less whether we pulled it out or not.
Although we do have to remember that that was in the kinder years of pre 9/11.
True, true.
So
Trying to show our age here.
it was actually yeah, on our side of the country, it was actually a nice way for us to go down and have a chit chat with our counterparts, and maybe have a cup of coffee and find out what they knew and what was new with them, and they would find out what was going on with us.
Yep.
I'm not even sure that goes on anymore, but.
Well, yeah, I think that's electronic now, isn't it? I mean, but we maybe one of our colleagues who are still in the front line or who knows about it could let us know. But that draft rule was created on again by one of the president's executive orders in January. But all foreign nationals who want to stay more than 30 days will be required to apply for registration and fingerprinting, except for Canadians. And this, of course, has some wags in Canada really talking silly.
I think the biggest thing we have to remember here, and it goes back even when you and I were boy immigration officers,
yes,
that we have always been aliens. The U.S. has not changed its terminology in the last 100 days. You look at the U.S. immigration legislation, and it refers to citizens, non-immigrant workers who are in essence aliens, dare I say that. People who are there living permanently aren't permanent residents like they are in Canada, they're alien residents. So, I don't understand. Well, I guess I do. Alien sounds so foreign, so unclean, like you got to go and wash your hands after saying the word. I don't know, but that's their terminology. They can call us.
It's a legal terminology. It's yes.
And whether you like it or whether you don't, you have a choice. You either put up with it or you don't go. There's no use getting your knickers in a knot over this because we have individuals in Canada who decide that that's a harsh term or a very, very terrible thing. Maybe you decide it's kind of like going to a grocery store or going to a particular gas station. If you don't like it, you boycott it. You don't do it. You don't buy from there. And that's the choice that you have here. If you don't like the terminology that the U.S. is using, then deal with it in your own terms. Yeah. Don't go on the national press saying that it's draconian, or terrible, or whatever it happens to be. You are the master of your own fate.
Well, I thought it was rather bizarre that there's, according to the article from CBC, I quote that Montreal-based immigration lawyer Patrice Brunet said that changing U.S. travel requirements to demand that Canadians be fingerprinted would mark, quote, a very drastic policy shift, unquote, where Canadians would be considered for the foreseeable future, quote, regular citizens from any other country, unquote, rather than friends of the U.S. I don't know anything in the immigration legislation of Canada that talks about friends of Canada who can come here and get special exemptions because they're nationals who are friends of Canada. Like, this is so silly. This is grown up time for I think a lot of folks who have been laboring under the misapprehension that the American law makes a special sort of carve out for Canadians with respect to immigration law. It never did.
It never did. It was, and it always, I think, will continue to be a volume aspect. If the bulk of the travelers that are going to cross into the United States are from Canada, are they going to want to tie up all of their officers photographing, fingerprinting 90% of the people that are in the office? I mean, are they prepared for lineups in their offices that aren't built for that, probably never will be built for that? And the other side of that is, if I was a Canadian citizen and I had to have that I-94 where do I have to drop that off? And how, if it's in a Canadian office, does that mean that I have to stop and go into the CBSA office up here to drop a form off, or can I give it to the primary? There's lots of things, and even that simple thing in itself is going to cause an awful lot of backlogs and time at the borders, and
well, let's think about the practicality, and I'm sure that registered with the folks who were looking at the draft executive order. The vast majority of border crossings between Canada and the United States is land border.
Mm-hmm.
Now, you cannot imagine having everybody get out of the car and get their fingerprints taken if you were going to really enforce this. This is just practically stupid. And I think the folks in Washington at the operational level probably brought this to the attention of the and said, look, this is dumb. Okay. And what's the advantage? We already scan passports. You can't get in without a passport. They know who you are. If you have a problem, you send them to secondary and you deal with it. And now the snowbird thing, which really got my attention, was this fellow by the name of Rudy Buttigieg, who's the president of the Canadian Association of Retired Persons, who represents 250,000 Canadians, and the snowbirds who routinely go to the States for their 183 days minus one, so they're paying with taxes. I'm hearing, he says, that people are not only annoyed, but they're insulted. Together with the idea of Canada becoming the 51st state, this is like a deliberate attempt to irritate Canadians. Now, let's just take out the 51st state foolishness that's been going on here for some weeks. Let's talk about the annoyance, the idea that they're trying to irritate Canadians. Goes back to what you were saying. There was never a carve out for Canadians in U.S. immigration law. Okay, you put your Canadian hat on, and if we had a regulation that said Americans have to register in Canada for the 30 days plus while they go to their cottages all over the place, we would say that's the law. Deal with it. But there's some kind of bizarre thing about harsh language. Brunettes, it's harsh language in the executive order to describe foreign nationals who overstay their visas. Like, he's talking like it's okay to overstay your visa. Apparently in Canada, we have a different approach to people who overstay their visas or don't want to comply with our immigration laws.
Well, in some ways we do. You know that as well as I do. I think we call them asylum seekers or something.
No, but it's the virginity, you might say, of Canadians vis-a-vis their relationship with the U.S. I think is gone. Okay, because and I said this the other day, that we used to always be seen in the media in the U.S. as, oh, they're so nice, they're so polite, they're always saying sorry. Well, in many ways, this kind of talk kind of looks like, to me, in its ascendancy, is the ugly Canadian, like the ugly American, in the stereotypical fashion. That we get, they're exhibiting the same sort of puffed up, silly, nationalistic approach to a law that is none of your business. You don't have to go to the United States. You can go someplace else. Americans don't have to come to Canada, apparently, because you're not going to get your Scotch, or rather your bourbon, anyway while you're here. And I digress there, but you know what I'm saying.
It is. It's just one of those issues that this has always been the case, and it may have been enforced in certain cases, and in the vast majority of cases, it was just kind of we don't have the time, we don't have the resources, and we don't really have the inclination to do with it. So now they've taken the inclination out and said that this will be done. And I'm sure that there will still be people who have no intent of going down for 31 days into the United States, but through, especially this time of year where you might get caught in a snowstorm or a highway shuts down, where you not intentionally going to the 31st or the 32nd day, but that's just the way it is. And I don't think that the U.S. is going to be too bent out of shape with that. I could be wrong, but I would certainly think probably not.
Look, I think common sense will prevail. It eventually always does in these matters, because to do it any other way just clogs up the system. And you know, we're famous both in Ottawa and Washington for finding ways to not have the system clogged up at the airports vis-a-vis Canada, U.S. travel, or vice versa, and the borders, because it costs too much money. It's always about the money anyway. So that's, I think that at the end of the day, that was part of it. But you know, to really understand that the times have changed, you know, I think a lot of these folks have forgotten that after 9/11, all bets were off about how we operated on the border.
Yeah,
you know, that just changed when George Bush decided to impose travel restrictions into the U.S. In other words, you had to have a passport to get into the U.S.
Yeah.
That changed everything forever in a day. It was no longer just, you know, drive up to the booth and say, where are you from? And you said, you know, Vancouver. Yeah, where are you going? Blaine. Okay, have a nice day. And that was it. You know, that ended. But curiously, on our side, we continued to be, you know, loosey-goosey on that, because in fact, for a long period after this rule went into play, we still didn't require Americans to have any proof beyond satisfying you verbally that they could go back to the States.
Yeah.
It was, you know, it took a long time before the question of, well, if they don't have a passport, how are they going to get back? No one really sort of cottoned on to that for a couple of years, as my memory serves me correct.
Yeah.
So, you know, it's just part of the, I guess, the realization maybe for Canadians, even in 2025, that we are foreigners to Americans. Don't, you know, we may have a special relationship, but that's not, this is not 1950, it's not 1980, this is 2025.
No. Yeah.
Everything has changed. You know, our country has changed in many ways, which is not to you know, you can't recognize this place from 10 years ago. So why would you expect the Americans to be any different and we're only talking about border issues as it pertains to mobility back and forth. And I think the Americans knew full well that the fingerprinting thing was simply too onerous a thing to put into practice. Yeah. So, and what would you achieve other than, you know, reducing the number of folks who might travel there for tourism purposes? So, and anyway, not to beat a dead horse, I think. Sorry, go ahead.
I was going to say the other thing that really kind of makes me want to say and scratch my head. We are so fixated on this Canada becoming a fifth state or not, the rhetoric around that. But then, as you pointed out just a couple of minutes ago, we had a poll go out, and now we're contemplating joining the EU.
I'm sorry.
That
is so stupid.
This is a good idea.
Yeah, that's right. It was CTV News. Brussels is the byline here, saying that could Canada join the EU? And I read somewhere that somebody said, well, we already border the EU. And what are you talking about? So there's an island somewhere up in the Arctic that has been for decades a problem between Denmark and Canada as to who owns this island. So it's obviously just off of Greenland, between Greenland and I don't know, Ellesmere Island. It's such an obscure thing that the island was continually being questioned as whether it was in Canadian waters or in Greenland/Danish waters. So they finally decided to cut the island in half. And so one side of the island is in Canada, the other side of the island is in Denmark, ostensibly, which then makes us an EU country or potentially a European neighbor, because we have this hunk of dirt out in the middle of nowhere that is divided in half, and that should be enough to get us into some negotiation with Brussels about being,
and I think
for candidacy in the EU.
And as you rightly pointed out also, Tom, that, if we became the 51st state, we would lose all our identity. Well, what do you think would happen if you joined the EU? Right? You might have an EU passport and travel all various and sundry places, but you are then obligated to follow the rules that the EU makes, not
You
what
might
you're.
want to ask the Brits about that, since they decided to get the hell out of the EU
Yeah.
some 5 years ago, right? So if the same people, as you say, who get to dander up about their sovereignty being challenged by the United States administration, but then are happily wanting to have a discussion about whether joining the 27 EU countries, apart from asking the Brits and Brexit and how that turned out, you would then have to understand that all 27 of the EU states have lost their sovereignty to an unelected bunch of bureaucrats running around in Brussels making up stuff.
Yeah, and in the past we've talked about it when they were going to send the EU naval forces to the Pacific Ocean to do something or other. I think Taiwan, I don't know. And I'm trying to figure out, okay, yeah, Europe does border Asia, but I didn't know, one, that we would then have to have an EU naval force, which I don't think there is. A lot of silly talk goes on, and a lot of this stuff, like the comments about the 51st state joining the EU, whether we're aliens or whether we're visitors, we get so caught up, and it becomes a heart issue, not a mental issue.
Well, emotional. And that makes sense. There's no denying that. And just as it's emotional for our American cousins. And this is how bad things happen when emotions get out of control, and not fact, and not logic, and not law, and not common sense. This is what scares me about all this crazy talk, which admittedly, began in Mar-a-Lago when the former prime minister went down there and tried to grovel, basically, at that meeting, and it ended up very badly for us. And of course, we're faced with a leader of the United States that has his own way of projecting. Yeah, it's if you read his book, The Art of the Deal, which I've only seen excerpts. I'm trying to get a copy. He create chaos, get everybody all nuts, and then it all kind of washes out. And I think that's precisely what he's doing with this whole tariff thing, and particularly with the taunting of Canadians with this 51st state stuff. I think it's right out of The Apprentice, the TV show we did 40 years ago, where you throw stuff out and see what sticks.
Yeah, well, you and I remember that from our years in the civil service, where what was the saying? We're going to throw the jello on the wall and see what sticks. And this is really the same thing.
Then this article that this morning in CBC again. I'm sorry, I actually was reading stuff from the CBC website, which I try not to, but and sometimes they actually do some journalism occasionally. But this one really got my attention, and I sent it to you. And I just quote here from this article that they post on their website, which is posted today, actually, by a fellow by the name of Evan Dyer. Okay. Well, so anyway, this article starts, and I quote: former, it's always a former guy who, who's suddenly got nothing else to do like us, goes out on a limb and starts talking. But be that as it may, former senior Canadian intelligence officials, plural, say that Canada needs to be on the lookout for campaigns aimed at destabilizing the country amid U.S. President Donald Trump's escalating 51st state threats. Now they're threats. The language is insane. He isn't threatening anything. He's making it's chaos. It's a joke, and he's basically trolling the Trudeau/Carney administration here. Okay. They also told CBC News that the most potent weapon wielded by the Trump administration to advance the cause of annexation would likely not be the intelligence agencies directed by Director of National Intelligence Tulsi Gabbard. Now, do you think Tulsi Gabbard is sitting around figuring out how to send Manchurian candidates from the intelligence thing into Canada and to start messing about with our media? I mean, come on. This is I'm just
Well,
I
think
just
this
it's laughable.
always goes back to, well, in my opinion, it goes back to we've got an issue, so let's find an expert. And who says that that is the expert? I always go back to that same thing. Who psychoanalyzes the psychoanalyst? Right? I mean, we're famous out here. We've got people who like to get on TV. They've never met a microphone that they haven't fallen in love with, and they just love to have the verbal diarrhea spurt out of their mouth so they can hear themselves talk. And these become the experts that people run to all the time. And it's not because they're experts, it's because they want their 15 minutes of fame over and over and over again. Not to say, you were just mentioning about half an hour or so ago that Fox News is now available over the news. You can
streaming.
No,
you can get it
so
streaming.
Does this fall into this story?
I don't know, but just to give you more insight into this craziness, Ward Elcock, who used to be the head of CSIS during 9/11 times, he says, I would regard Mr. Musk as a problem. I think that's on a number of fronts. So now he's suggesting that Musk is going to work to undermine Canadian sovereignty somehow, or is a proponent of the 51st state agenda. Where the hell does he get this from? It's like throwing gasoline on a fire. Look, there's a lot of people in Canada are very upset with this whole 51st state stuff without having any evidence other than this craziness that started in Mar-a-Lago, which is what I at the time called the joke heard around the world. So now this article is suggesting that the U.S. intelligence agency, primarily the CIA, which has destabilized lots of countries around the world, they might be trying to do that in Canada. Are you kidding me? And whoa, it gets even better. The former spy chiefs say a campaign aimed at Canada would rely less on cloak and dagger tactics and more on social media, such as Elon Musk and X. Well, this is really dangerous. X is going to be where the American fifth column comes through, with BS. I mean, come on.
Yeah. I guess that's well, three points we've left our viewers, and I'm kind of wondering if that's enough. And maybe by next week, some of this stuff will be replaced by, God forbid, an asteroid heading towards Earth. It's going to wipe us out. Yeah, I think we have actually gone past the COVID stage. We're actually getting back to the old newsroom series where we're into the 72-hour news cycles and
maybe 48 hours. I don't think even 72 hours. You usually say it's the goldfish thing here, where the memory of a goldfish used to be 72 hours. I think it's only 48 hours. Listen,
well, it could be 4.8
this
seconds.
country just put into place, or shortly will swear into office, someone who 6 weeks ago, if you'd ask a person on the street who is Mark Carney, they wouldn't be able to tell you, unless they had an old bill in their wallet that an old $20 bill or whatever that has his signature on it when he was a Bank of Canada governor. But apart from that, a guy who's lived most of his time in London or New York, suddenly from central casting comes in and he's going to be the prime minister. And there's they had a student council election kind of to decide he was going to be the coronated one. If you're looking at this from the outside, this is a bad movie. This is a really cheap Hollywood political drama thriller comedy. all wrapped into one. You know, uh, this is nuts. And when I start reading crazy stuff like the business of the intelligence community going on about, whoa, you know, this is just there's Americans sneaking in all over the place. They're going to overthrow the country. Literally, this is what they're saying. You know, like we're going to do a regime change in Ottawa. Are you kidding me? You know, and and the other thing this guy says in this article, and then I'll shut up, is, quote, "You keep repeating things often enough, people believe it," says this fellow. If it continues down that path for years, virtually everybody can be worn down. So didn't Minister McKenna, who used to be in the Trudeau cabinet, say at a bar last year or 2 years ago before she hightailed it out of the government, that if you tell people a lie, which is what they were doing, after a while they believe it?
Mm-hmm.
Of course, maybe she was reading Joseph Goebbels' book back from the 30s about how you tell a lie enough times and it becomes the truth. But I mean, come on. And to suggest that Canadians are so stupid that they believe everything they see on social media. I mean, if that's true, if that's how the intelligence community believes the intelligence quotient of Canadians writ large is that low, then maybe we deserve to be taken over.
Well, and if we did believe it, there would be a lot more people sending their money to that Nigerian prince. That,
you know, didn't get my check again.
Apparently not.
Anyway. So those were I was going to say, those are the 3 blocks that we were going to talk about today, but there's one more I guess we have to tell people. On May the 5th, Microsoft is dumping Skype off of its platform, and it's going to require us to, because we use Skype here to record this and to do our editing. So we're going to have to look at an alternative system. And so will millions of people around the world who've come to rely on Skype to communicate with their families, and to it was a great system. And I guess it was too good. It was too cheap. It was too ubiquitous. It was too ordinary for the wonks at Microsoft. I guess they couldn't wrangle any money out of it, because their alternative after May 5th is you have to go to
Teams.
What's it called? Teams, and you have to have a subscription, and of course it costs money. And Skype is free. So once again, it's a system which takes away from sort of the ability of regular folks just to communicate with each other and not have to worry about what it costs. And a corporation like Microsoft has done it again, basically to make it difficult.
I don't know. Yeah, it's business, I guess. But
well, it's typical. I'm sorry to say, but anyway, we said we'd do 30 minutes for this episode. We're 8 minutes over, but it's good to have you back, Bob.
Good to be back.
I was getting lonely. Not that lonely.
Good. But anyway, to our viewers, don't forget, we rely on your generosity. If you have any money to buy us a coffee, we'd certainly appreciate it. If you like what we're talking about, hit the like buttons. If you know other people that might be interested, pass along the link.
Absolutely. And we'll try to make this part 1 of our saga of the North American tariff debate, because this is like a hose pipe that's been cut and just is splashing out stuff day after day. And then the next episode, which we'll do next week, episode 9, season 4, we'll see how our newly minted Prime Minister is going to deal with all this.
He's already said he's going to win the war.
The war.
Which I didn't even know we were in.
I didn't know we declared war.
I didn't either. Yeah.
But wait a minute. Do you know we don't even have a sitting parliament?
I know. But apparently that didn't stop them from appointing, they now have, 90 of the 105 senators are
That's called,
independent.
Oh yeah, they're independent, all right. Oh, you always use the adage of the Chinese, may you live in interesting times.
Yes, may we live in interesting times. It's
And
really not the nice thing you hope it is.
no, but let's close out on a positive note. We're all vertical, healthy.
Yes. Hmm.
The war in Ukraine seems to be winding down. That would be nice. As
Would be
crazy as some people might think certain leadership is in the world, if that is put to a halt, that would be good for everybody.
Oh, yes. So many young individuals losing their lives over
Yep. Yep.
issues that,
Then they can fix the thing in Gaza, and everybody can go and be happy.
yeah,
A lot. So that's a
don't
positive thought.
worry, be
Be
happy.
happy. All right. See you next week, Bob.
If not before.